Paul, thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to be with you all today. Name is James Glueck, and Executive Director of the Plant-Based Products Council. And we're a Washington-based trade association that's focused on federal policy. We've heard a lot about that yesterday with Betsy's conversation and several of the conversations this morning talking about regulatory and sort of kind of other kind of administration policy issues. And so our job is really, to represent members. And excited to have a few of those folks with us today. But what's unique is our membership represents the value chain. So we've got folks who are corn growers who serve in our membership, as well as folks who are processors, folks who are kind of manufacturers, as well as folks that have a consumer brand kind of face. And so I think that gives us a good opportunity to educate policymakers, particularly in keeping these issues in this conversation in a bipartisan space at the federal level. So with that, excited to be joined by a few of those folks, and as we kind of look for them to introduce kind of who they are and sort of how they're involved and their organizations are involved in innovation. And so kind of we'll look to start that conversation. Eric, you sat next to me, so Eric Lee with Primient.
Yeah, I'm Eric Lee, Director of Business Development for all things bioindustry and fermentation at Primient. For those who aren't familiar with Primient, we're a 2-plus-year-old company with a 100-year history. So we are what's formerly the primary products business within Tate & Lyle. And if you go back as far as I do in this space, nearly 40 years, a lot of people will remember us as A.E. Staley. We are bioprocessors by nature, right? We take corn, we process hundreds of thousands of bushels per day at each of our wet mill locations, and we hope to add value to those end products that can be derivatized out of that corn. Where we fit in this bioeconomy is we're integral, right? We not only produce bio-based products today, which have a value in the market space, but we're a key contributor to the ag economy, right? We're part of that renewable cycle. We're also engaged in this next stage development. We have a long history of being in bio and fermentation, whether you would look at that from our citric acid production facilities, or probably more key to this discussion with PBPC, our engagement with a joint venture to produce bio-based PDO down in Tennessee. What we're looking to do now is to really be a facilitator of that next level of growth and development. We realize that we have large-scale operations that produce large amounts of fermentable or convertible carbon sources, which can be key to unlocking bioeconomic growth. And so we've announced a couple key projects over the course of the last few months, and I'll be happy to talk about those in a little more detail, but key to that and key to the discussion is where a partnership we have with a company called Synonym fits into our IFAB Tech Hub in Central Illinois, and we can talk about that a little bit more as we go forward.
Great, thanks, Eric. And Luke with CJ BioAmerica.
Yeah, Luke, CJ BioAmerica, Director of ESG. CJ is a global company. We're in all kinds of different things: food and food service, entertainment and media, retail and logistics, and then the bio division that I'm part of. And even in the bio division, there are just so many different divisions within the division. I am in the BioAmerica division, and we focus in Fort Dodge, Iowa, solely on animal nutrition and plant nutrition. Another aspect of the bio division is CJ Biomaterials, which is a PBPC member, and now I am, by proxy, the same thing. I'm looking forward to more involvement in that to try to affect and prepare for legislative and policy issues. Something that was noted in one of the earlier discussions is that we have all of these amazing things we can do from a bio perspective, but the regulatory bodies just aren't catching up fast enough. Specific to the business, though, ESG is sustainability. And so my fingers are in pretty much every part of the operation, locally and then globally. So I'm looking forward to further discussion today.
Good deal. And then finally, Will with ADM.
Hi, everybody. I'm Will Schroeder. I'm Segment Director for Chemicals at Archer Daniels Midland. We are a commodity agricultural products processing company. So just as Eric was mentioning for Primient, we're quite square in the middle of the agricultural supply chain. Largely, the description of our business is that we'll take raw material inputs that come from our farmer partners in the agricultural supply chain, process those products into higher value added products, all across food, feed, industrial chemicals, what have you. We process a number of different crops, not just corn, soybeans, but also cotton, rapeseed, or canola. Oh, yeah.
Too many to count.
Yeah, too many to count. So one of our great goals right now is to be able to look for bio-based alternatives to conventionally produced products that are produced through fossil-based technologies. And we're looking for new innovation and opportunities to be able to grow those segments in that market.
Good deal. Thank you all. And something that the Plant-Based Products Council does each year is look at some consumer data, some demand data to understand and tell the story to policymakers of what's driving the industry. Some of the statistics I think that stand out are, 66% of consumers in the survey last year are familiar with plant-based products, and that was a 10% increase in a matter of 3 years. Maybe more notably that 62% of those surveyed reported purchasing products on a monthly basis. And then probably, more exciting for us as we think about the federal policy space is when asked a question about, federal incentives, tax breaks, et cetera, we had 71% of those who responded said that they supported those types of initiatives for these types of bio-based products. The question was also asked, that we're in an election season, so it was also asked on a political basis. If you identify as a Republican or a Democrat, how do you feel about those types of policy moves? And excited to see that over 2/3 of those who said they're Republican were supportive, and over 80% of those who said they were Democrat were supportive. So I think that helps us tell that story in a pretty broad way that there is consumer demand for the industry. But we've also heard a lot about challenges, and so in making that leap, as you all and your companies are from the line to sort of from the laboratory to the manufacturing line, curious about some of those hurdles that you've seen to growth, and if there are any maybe policy solutions or kind of incentives, et cetera, that might help ensure that these products are available for consumers. And kind of might start with Luke, with you.
Give Eric
a
right
break
down the
this
line,
time. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So speaking to just policy issues in general, I think most people, if they're in the animal nutrition space, they know about the evergreen clause between AFCO and FDA is now turning brown, and that's no longer going to be something that's an avenue that's readily available to get a new animal feed approved for use. And I think things like that are just kind of dropped in the lap of industry and the public kind of set us back. In the last panel, they talked about aligning timelines, and when we are looking at an innovative new bio-based feed or biomaterial that can complement what's out there, whether it's complementing petroleum-based or just what the consumer needs, it's best to have the straightest path possible to get regulatory approval. And the more obstacles that are put in place for that, it delays your timelines, or at least it unhinges the alignment of those timelines. And in the end, that costs money. And the longer that we take to get something to market, first of all, the longer we have before we can see an ROI on the investment, but it also detracts from the investment that we're actually getting, whether it's from VCs or if it's from our headquarters or partnering with another company. So I think one of the biggest obstacles is just the lack of regulatory efficiency, and I think that's just part of the game. But when things like in institutions like the PBPC can work together, or on the feed, AFIA, when they can work together to kind of harmonize global standards or even domestic standards, that's probably the path we should look for.
Yeah, I think I'd second that. I mean, I think it's more than just talk about like tax rebates and things like that. Obviously, those are important. We're in a period right now where construction costs are really high, and that is a bit of a drag on the industry. But I think it's more than that. It's about setting up the right environment and framework to be able to get products to market, right? Whether it's regulatory issues, whether it's just definitional questions, right? What are clear definitions of what's bio-based and what's not? just the foundational structure of the industry. I think is just like really critical, and those aren't necessarily, they don't have a price tag with them, but I think they're still like really critical to be able to move the industry forward and ensure success, right?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but I would say it's clearly not one size fits all. What folks at the lab level need in terms of incentives and support to grow and develop and to move technology forward are very, very different than what we need at a level of a plant that processes 250,000 bushels of corn every day. And so at a level of where we're trying to foster growth and development, we're highly sensitive to what can we do to help build that ecosystem to make sure that the folks in the development stage are getting the funding and the support they need, and not necessarily being fully reliant on VC to do that, because we know that's highly variable in nature, and hoping that we have a growth path that makes a seamless transition from that lab to line. I think for us, I mean, one of our biggest challenges, obviously, if we talk about what we do on a plant scale, is permitting and things like that, and having a structure that allows us to move within that very challenging environment when everybody knows our long-term goals for sustainability and reduction of emissions is something that still has to be addressed.
Yeah, and something that we often hear in thinking about growth and adoption is that cost is a big factor from a consumer perspective or a downstream perspective. That same consumer data, I think about 75% of those surveys said that they assumed that costs would be higher for sustainable products. But curious about, quickly, thoughts on how balancing that need for kind of durable and sort of long-lasting or kind of, products that meet the need with that competitiveness question on the cost side.
Yeah, maybe, should I jump in?
Yeah, go. You seem
work our
ready
way
to,
down?
ready to jump, so yeah.
Yeah, my feeling is like, well, the simple answer, which is probably not a fair answer, is like one would hope you could do both, right? You would hope that you can provide quality and you can do it at a competitive price, because once you can do that, you're in the market, right? You'll be there to stay. That's obviously that in a way it maybe trivializes the challenges that we face. I think a big part of it is like careful consideration of your targets and what products to go after, right? These tend to be really big bets that we're placing in terms of capital investment, in terms of research dollars, in terms of time, all of those things. And you want to be careful about them. The opportunities, I think, do exist out there, but they're not everywhere, right? And some, what may look like an opportunity may not be upon more careful consideration. And so I think there's a big question about really good due diligence, choose your opportunities wisely, and do your homework. I think the opportunities are there, but you do have to be careful, right, and thoughtful.
Yeah, and from the biomaterials perspective, we look at a lot of different potential bio-based products based on need. So if a potential partnering company has an idea, or if we even have one internally, first we ask, can we do it? And then we ask, can we do it at scale? And then it seems like a little late in the game, we ask, can we do it economically? And usually the answer is no. And one product, in specific, I can't, I won't say the product, but it's about 8 times more per unit cost or per unit to produce than the petro-based product. But we have global leading fermentation technology that I think, based on our historical path of becoming more efficient, instead of using 6 main fermenters to produce 100,000 tons of product, we can make 180,000 tons per year using 3 fermenters. So like we intrinsically have those abilities to improve and become more efficient, and that's something that we're starting to incorporate more and more, so that by the time we think we can go to market and be commercial scale, we can also be competitive. But there's, it was touched on in the last panel, the petroleum industry is so heavily subsidized. And well, hell, if what we were doing was subsidized like that, yeah, we'd be out there today making all these bio-based products. And but we're not that lucky yet. So.
Yeah, I would just use I think Will said it well, you'd like to be able to do both, right? So if we use our BioPDO joint venture as an example, right? This is a business that originally was focused around Tate and Lyle developing a core product line in terms of propane diol for things like carpet fiber, right? And you're competing directly with a petroleum-based alternative, and so you're at a disadvantage on cost and a disadvantage on selling price. As that business has evolved over the past 20 years, we've worked hard to maximize capacity, maximize efficiency in that facility to lower our cost of manufacture. At the same time, we've ultimately improved the quality to where I think last week we talked in a leadership team meeting that we've now moved a core business into some cosmetics applications, right? And we have secured a major 100% commitment from a big cosmetics manufacturer, and it's not just driven by cost, it's driven by quality of what we're producing. And so I think you gotta put all those pieces together if you're really gonna be successful. Sure, it's about cost. If we're not running that facility or any facility at maximum output, then it's costing us more to produce than we wanna produce, right? So you gotta have that under control, but it's the whole package.
Thanks, Eric. And that quality question, I think, is one that most folks need to focus on. And as we think about that cost conversation, labor is a big part of that. It's something that as new facilities and expanded facilities, the different labor needs that you all face. And so, curious from a workforce perspective, I know that you all are engaged in that conversation in a very thoughtful way. So Eric, might start with you.
Yeah, I'll use our IFAB Tech Hub as an example there, right? I don't know how many of you are familiar, but go out and read online, right? We're building a consortium in central Illinois within a 50-mile radius that can do exactly what we started with here, go from lab to line manufacture. And sure, a lot of that is technical. Some of that, from our perspective, is bringing to bear a full-scale demo fermentation and downstream processing facility that will hopefully facilitate folks from moving from the lab up to pre-commercial demonstration. But how do we do this if we don't have a fully trained workforce, right? And so a key part of that proposal that we built to the EDA was a workforce development package. And if I use Decatur, Illinois as an example, it's an underserved community. It's a community when we look at our wet mill operations there. I told you we have a 100-year history. I work closely with a guy who's there for half of that time, a 50-year employee at Primient or its different names, right? How do we deal with that as folks age out, and how do we replace that knowledge? And so we're working really closely with vocational, community colleges, and higher ed to really kind of develop those training programs, whether it's internships, whether it's co-ops, whether it's us communicating directly with folks like Parkland, who I see out there, Parkland Community College, to tell them, hey, these are the skill sets we need. These are the types of training programs we need to have a active, engaged, developable workforce. We need to work together to do that. So the cool thing about the IFAB is we're all working together to deliver that message. It's not just about building capacity. It's about forward thinking and building the workforce and building the entire ecosystem. So for us, it's a critical thing.
Yeah. And Will, might turn out the IFAB is something y'all are involved in.
Yeah, I'll jump onto that too. I mean, I would point to the IFAB too as a great example, right? So as Eric was saying, it involves not just like UIUC, which is just down the road in Champaign, but it's also Parkland College, it's Richland Community College, it's a lot of the labor unions in the area, the pipe fitters, the steel workers, they're all involved. So I mean, when I started in biotech, I mean, it was all about like the PhDs standing at the lab and with their pipetters in their hands trying to develop new technology. We are past that, right? That's still a critical role, and as we develop new technology, we need those folks, definitely need those folks. But now we're into manufacturing and repair and maintenance of existing equipment, all of those things. It's a much more diverse workforce that we need to start thinking about. And I actually think that like the Midwest is really well positioned for that, right? Well, Eric, you know it. I mean, you just drive down the street and Richland is right there. It's like it's our neighbor, right? So it's a great situation to be in, and it's wonderful to be able to work together with them to be able to develop that workforce that we need in order to just keep the plants running, the shifts on time.
So CJ Bio is in a town called Fort Dodge in northwest Iowa, and it's a town of about 25,000 people. We are lucky enough to have a community college in town, but with, I think it's roughly a 2.4% unemployment rate, and the fact that when we started business in 2012, Cargill was also starting their wet mill at the same bio campus. So it was extremely difficult to hire staff, and we wanted to start out with about 120 to 150. Right now we're at well over 250 employees. One of the things that was beneficial with Iowa Central Community College was we didn't have a plant because we were building it from a cornfield. And they worked so well with us to have our employees in their quality lab learning how to run the HPLCs and the mass spec and all of the fun, cool, sciencey equipment. But they also worked with our maintenance guys in their maintenance department so that they could work on pumps and drives and VFDs and all of that stuff. They would buy equipment that was similar to ours so that by the time the plant came operational, they had some hands-on. They even set aside classroom space for us so that we could teach them the CJ way, the CJ history, and our internal knowledge sharing. We're also working with a university that's about 45 minutes away from us to develop a degree program for specific things that we see lacking in graduates. So whether it's called industrial fermentation or DSP or something like that, at the end of the day, the universities are partnering with us to more strategically focus the education so that even in the high school, junior college, or university level, students are coming out ready to go instead of having this long onboarding process and learning path. And I think that's just critical. Otherwise, you said it best, Eric, if you don't have the people to do it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. And it sounds like sort of the collaboration is a theme on the workforce question for sure, but also across the value chain. And so curious from y'all's perspective, how you get a sense for evolving consumer preferences and ways to respond to that to ensure that the quality product is there. Eric, I might start with you just if you think that. Or...
I think it's, I think consumer preferences and trending, we have folks that work on this all the time, and sometimes it feels like it's how the wind blows, right? I think, if you look at our core business, we're involved in that sweetener food and beverage market, and for years people have been saying, high fructose corn syrup is bad, it's going out, it's going down, it's going to rapidly decline. Well, I would say the numbers don't really support that, even though there's probably not long-term potential for growth and other things. So really gauging and understanding consumer preference, understanding, are folks really willing to pay a green premium for certain things? We've struggled with that argument for a long time. So again, I tend to focus on how do we establish those two key criteria, price parity versus what you're dealing with today, and performance, right? Whatever you're producing, if you're going to influence how customers behave and act, it better be better than what they're buying today, and it better cost the same or less. I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
In terms of our internal only one philosophy, in order for us to do something, it has to be first, best, or different. And I think, yes, price is important, consumer demand is important. We're doing more B2B, so the cost seems to be less about sales price and things like that and what the customer will pay versus the total holistic cost of that product. So when you bring in carbon footprint, LCAs and everything, it may, maybe to the consumer it might cost more, but with carbon credits and everything, it may be more economically advantageous to go green.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, I agree with both of what Luke and Eric are saying. I mean, price and quality won't go out of style. They just won't, right? They haven't in thousands of years. They won't now. There's always the question about what are the latest trends and will those change? But I think from our perspective, we're looking for cost advantage, right? Low cost, and being able to provide a quality product that consumers will want, regardless of whether it's biorenewable or not, right? It's a great thing. I mean, I think it's clear that consumers, given the choice, they'll prefer biorenewable. I think Eric is right. The question of whether it commands a price premium, that's up for debate, and it probably depends on the individual circumstance. But in the end, if you can be in a low cost position and you can provide a quality product, that won't change. That just won't change.
And the green premium, the sustainability question has come up, and curious as you think about that issue, providing some credibility, some transparency across the value chain, there's importance there. So kind of curious from your three perspectives, how you engage in ensuring that what the consumer thinks they're getting is very clear, be that label or the process as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say that, and I'm far back in the value chain, so I'm not really at the B2C interface. But I think that it's not always. I wonder whether it's always clear to the consumer just how much of their product is renewable or not, right? I wonder whether we really do have clear definitions that are robust about what constitutes biorenewable, or whatever the phrase is that you may land on. I know that there's work going on to be able to more clearly define that, and more clearly define a lot of the pieces and the structure of the biorenewable industry. I just go back to the old engineering dictum that, like, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I feel like in some places we're a little bit in that situation where we're still evolving the ways to be able to measure the bioeconomy and how we're contributing to it. As that develops, I think that will help with the infrastructure and being able to, like, more clearly understand where the value propositions are and where we're contributing in terms of quality, price, all those things.
Yeah, I would just say sustainability is critical for us in how we do our day-to-day operations. As an example, we've moved away from coal at all of our wet mills, and we strictly drive on cogen for power and steam, and that's really a key initiative to help us reduce some of our carbon footprint. But when we think about long-term development and how we engage with folks who maybe after they've moved through IFAB and they're ready to build a commercial facility co-located with ours, our numbers, our ability to be transparent about our initiatives and share with them ultimately become their numbers, right? When they buy substrate from us and they calculate how that's going to input or how that's going to affect their overall LCA, it's huge. So we're really engaged and directly sharing with folks that we're working with to develop big projects. Our head of sustainability, if she was here, would say, hey, look at our brand new impact report that was just released, right? Because there's a lot of great information there about how we're committed to regenerative ag and some of the other initiatives we're at. But if we don't clearly communicate that to people we're working with, then we miss the boat and we miss opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's the key is communication. So we're really proud of the fact of our internal mission of going beyond bio to renew the earth. So, things with like our sustainability reports, our social media campaigns, even our professional marketing, not just me typing on my Facebook page, but things like, we're doing this, we're regenerating this much water, we are 100% renewable electricity at our site, those kind of things. We're proud of it, so we talk about it all the time, and we educate our customers. The students in the high schools and the JCs when we go to visit those, and it's just getting that message out there as much and as frequently as possible.
No. And I think that conversation too, I imagine for all of you, starts upstream, right? It starts with the growers and continues all the way down through the consumer and demonstrating.
Yeah, I think Eric's call out about like regenerative ag is like a really good one, right? Being able to work with our partners on the farms and being able to help to incentivize renewable, responsible actions on the farm, because like that's what the whole bioeconomy is based on, right? It's like at the base, it's the farms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have over 1.1 million acres. All the corn we buy, all the corn we process is driven through regen ag programs. I think that's huge. I think it's one of those things that shows the circularity of the entire thing, and it's great to be driving that in partnership with the farmers. It's outstanding.
All comes back to corn.
Yep.
I think that's
And
a
soybeans.
good
Does anybody
spot.
have the ear of corn to
Yeah.
hold up? Somebody held up the corn yesterday. I don't have it with me, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up. The shot clock that we've got our eye on just kind of ended,
Oh,
so
okay.
there was no buzzer. But I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up the conversation on the consumer demand. It kind of all starts with the grower and everyone in between. So thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.